Welcome to the Red Couch Talk, Heather the Cruz-Cornaire. I'm so glad to have you here,
Yeah, it's great to be here, Angie. It's great to see you in a different setting other than on Ed's show.
which is where I guess we originally met,
We
right?
did, yeah.
And you've come a long way since we met. I think we met maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think we did. And I had no idea that you were working in the same landscape and you're doing an amazing job with your community platform. I wished I'd known about your community platform before because we work in Switzerland and we could have joined forces and collaborated. So it's just a pleasure to meet you and to find so much that we have in common with the community that we serve.
And you know what's even funnier? Um, we can use that as a fun fact, or you can even talk about another fun fact. But your your site is called Café Coach.
Yes.
And I recently told that somebody, originally my idea about, having was to have like a global people club lounge. So
Yeah.
what I had envisioned was to have like a place, like a cafe
Yeah.
owned by somebody else, but where I could do coaching back room or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was like 15 years ago. That was something I wanted to have. And then I thought, oh, Heather has the same idea.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It is, but I will give you a warning because I've protected Cafe Coach. It's intellectual property protected
Wow.
in the UK, and I think I did a European patent as well because Cafe Coach I started in 2008 or 2009, primarily as an idea to save funds on having bricks and mortar to do coaching.
Mhm.
And also what I noticed was that in an informal space, people are more open and they feel more naturally inclined to share. So I wanted to promote a platform that was very much bottom up and not so much corporate top down coaching, but rather a place where people could network and feel really safe. And what I've noticed is that so many different avenues have sprung up all over the world. There's a really big coaching cafe in Australia. It's all over the world because we don't really have a coaching culture here in the UK because we're tea drinkers. But anywhere where coffee is a really big magnet, they
Uh-huh.
do have a really strong coaching cafe culture. So that's what really drew me towards this cafe culture was living in Japan and seeing how much work was being done in cafes due to the high expense of bricks and mortar and renting space. So that was really where the innovation came from all those years ago. What I have discovered is that Cafe Coach is not really that appropriate for where my business is now.
Okay.
And the work that I do now is not really done primarily in cafes. But that's where I started, and I'm really proud of my origins. So thank you for bringing that up.
Well, why do you do what you do? What got you there?
Exactly. Um, well, I think you know, Angie, from where I've met you before, that I'm British, but my husband is French, and we met in Germany, and our first assignment was in Japan. And all of the work I've done has been primarily with American companies. So, from a very young age, when I started learning languages at school, um, I have always known that there is something about different cultures and this multiverse, if you will, in cultures that has been really attractive to me. And coming from an island and having an island mentality or growing up within this island mentality, I always knew that this wasn't really a good fit for me. So I think that's where an attraction for using my languages as a platform to go and work abroad and then moving into global talent mobility was just a natural fit. Although I would say that global talent mobility is my second career. So I come from a background, I used to be a translator. That's what took me to Germany. I worked for fantastic companies like Siemens Nixdorf, Coca-Cola up in Dusseldorf at the time. And I lived in Germany for 11 years where I met my husband. So I have a very strong bond, I feel, to Europe. I feel if anybody asks who I am or where I come from, I always say I'm European. And that is something that I feel ever more connected to in the work that I do, even more so in working in global talent mobility.
Now you work as a coach, but you also, and I think, that is also how you became so well known in the scene. You're also a researcher. So do you want to
Yes.
talk a bit about your research, what you found out? I'd like to quote you a lot because
Yeah.
obviously you're helping my business with,
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you. But I think you understand because you work with an underrepresented group that perhaps is under-recognized. So you get it. Okay. So what I've seen is, so for me, I am a coaching psychologist. So I am a psychologist. So I retrained in Japan, really, because I couldn't work. And
Mhm.
I think, discovering visa restrictions, challenges, arriving as a spouse and not having any coaching support, nobody to help me. This is why I've become such a strong advocate for this field and a voice for people. But what I've discovered now is that I've helped hundreds of families with their transitions. And I can still see that pictures of those families. I'm still in touch with many people that I've worked with through the wonderful work that REA does. So REA is a global HR consultant based in the US. I've been affiliated with them for the past 15 years. And so a lot of the engagement I do with REA is in the field of coaching international families that are moving abroad to take up a new post. And generally, as you know, one person in that equation is being promoted and has a wonderful job opportunity, and the other person has agreed that, yes, I may take a step back for a while we focus on your career, but very often the accompanying partner or spouse is highly qualified and moves in good faith to a new location to experience a wonderful new cultural adventure. And then sometimes there can be some barriers to either the eligibility of their qualifications, so the equivalence of licensure, or it could be visa restrictions, or it could be other restrictions that may prevent them from getting directly into a work space that suits them. And if you're a dual income family and you really rely on that income, this can cause some difficulties that are difficult to navigate. And so the work that I do, very similar to you, is to help find a meaningful purpose in that space, and to maybe overcome those challenges. So the coaching side of things is quite straightforward and transparent. And that work is really energizes me because empathetically I've been through very similar experience myself. And for me, my work is all about shared experience and lived experience. So that's the coaching side, which I didn't know I would go into, but I found the passion that I have for helping vocationally kind of took over.
Mhm.
And what's happened with the business psychology is that as a business psychologist, the work is so much broader. It's about learning and development, training, recruitment, finding the right strategies to find and fill, different talent gaps or skills gaps, to evaluate processes to make sure you're getting the right talent in the right job. And so that's a really big part of who I am as a psychologist. And I did a lot of work in that space in working in HRM and IHRM prior to the work that I'm doing now. So when REA commissioned me to do this research, to use the talent pool that they have globally, what I found is that I was tapping back into an advisory thought leadership area that is really exciting to me now. And ultimately, it's great doing the coaching work because it's really energizing and you're working on the ground from the ground up.
Mhm.
But what really excites me is also the decision-making, policy implications and practice process, because unless we see fundamental changes there, especially with the growth of health and well-being and resilience as it is being now researched and with hard evidence at how important this is for talent, unless changes are made to include underrepresented groups, for instance, like accompanying partners from a stance of health and well-being, then we're just going to see more and more efficiency cuts. We're going to see more and more budget cuts and cost containments that don't include the family that's moving on assignments. So I think really it's been a learning curve for me to see that I would be doing myself and the families I serve an injustice if I didn't do everything I could to try and promote the findings of this wonderful research that REA commissioned me to do. So that's kind of where I am right now. And it's very exciting. And I've had a lot of support, and I'm very grateful to people who are really interested in the innovation of the approach that I've taken with the data gathering and the data analysis, because this isn't done every day. And so this research has won multiple awards globally because of the innovation of using big data, which is quantification techniques, so the regular statistics that we use. But it also brings a voice to this group where a really open-ended questionnaire was designed in collaboration as well. We used Permits Foundation, an NGO that also supports the voice of accompanying partners, where we were able to ask questions around key workforce trends and themes post-pandemic that really gave them the opportunity to share their experiences. And in many cases, they said that they'd never been asked. They'd been on assignments with their partners and had actually never been asked for what their experience was moving and giving up whatever career they had to move. So I think that, again, was another signal to me that this could be a blind spot, and this could be a really important blind spot to share back with HRM and IHRM and different people who are policymakers, how important it is to be inclusive of these voices. So I'm sorry, I did. I explained a little bit in depth, really, how I've come to this equation, if you will, in global talent mobility, and I think it says a lot about where my career started and how the research perspective has led me to where I am now. And I feel a duty of care myself now to this community to keep promoting and even to keep researching and adding on new dimensions for us to consider as we are in a wave or a new dimension where health and well-being and resilience is really being seen as an equation, a game changer, if you will, for global mobility.
And I share your view, and I've been working on expat experience related to expats, but also expat spouse experience, probably for the last 20 years. And I've been like talking to windmills. Sometimes it feels like I've been talking to walls, telling also in my lectures, for example, on policy or in my upcoming global mobility policy. I will hopefully publish another book next year where we talk about policy, but I will always mention that we can't neglect the family system in the equation, because people are underestimating the effect of having to give up your identity, your professional identity as an expat spouse, gender irrespective who we are talking about, even for same-sex couples, etc.
Exactly. Yeah.
And everybody who's basically having a dual career
Yeah.
has that challenge. And
Yeah.
the challenges have become harder over the last 20 years because we have so many more dual career couples than we had in the late 90s, for example.
Yes.
So I completely agree, and I can just urge everyone who's listening and watching this, who's either an expat spouse or a global mobility manager, HR professional recruiter, to go down, have a look at the link. Because one of the things that I really loved about your output, your research output, that you also give an executive summary for people who are not researchers. It's like if you approach this as an academic, go deeper. But if you just want to know what the research was about, how how important it is to understand the psychological contract, for example, and why we have this gap. You spoke about a blind spot, but there's also this gap between what people are expecting psychologically from the international assignment and what is actually happening in reality.
Yes.
So everything you just mentioned, it's all there. People need to just go down, download the information, and have a look at it in more detail.
Yeah.
And also that brings me already to the next two questions, and maybe you want to answer them separately or in one, but If you could go back to, let's say, 20 years ago,
Yeah.
what would you advise a younger version of yourself? And also, if you think about the global mobility managers and HR professionals, I don't want to exclude HR because HR is very much involved in everything that we do. But if you think about their education, is
Yeah.
there anything that you feel we should stress more, they should learn more about? Because, from your experience, as you said, there's maybe a blind spot or they may be missing some points here.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And being a psychologist, I'm constantly having these Auseinandersetzungs, these internal discussions with myself. And I love that. I love the look ahead to 5 years and, what could be happening and look back and reflect, learn and grow. Um, I try not to ruminate too much about maybe should have done this or taken this road or what would have happened. For me, it's more about the growth, having a growth mindset to know what would I have done differently. And very often it's my own blind spots that I would perhaps do differently. But then I remember that we're all humans and we all learn. Well, we have the opportunity to learn from any mistakes, and that's the whole. For me, that's what life is about. But yeah, that's a really good question, and I think for me, the psychological contract is it's all about the human connection. And I think if I were to go back in time, I would focus more on my own support groups. I would focus more on perhaps asking other people for advice and more inclusion. But there wasn't internet 20 years ago. And I remember this because I was in Japan and I was doing my Master of Science there with distance learning. And the internet was only just being used for email. So, and I remember feeling quite isolated at the time. So I think it would be more, what I loved from the interview that you did with Ed Cohen, for instance, is that he said, and one of the things that resonated and stayed with me was he said, you have to build trust with others before you sell anything. For me, I'm not selling anything. It's just about awareness that I'm trying to disseminate. And for me, what I would say is that before you can trust others, trust yourself.
Oh.
And I think I would trust myself more.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Comes up
when
a
you're,
lot in coaching, I have to tell you.
yeah, but I wasn't a coach at the
Yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I was looking for a way. I was looking for my own way. And I always have had an intuition, or I've always been advocating others in my own way before I became a psychologist. And that's probably what led me to become a psychologist in the first place, even though I was told I wouldn't make a good psychologist because my personality traits were too male dominated, because I'm extremely systems focused, analytical and task focused. So whenever I did a Myers-Briggs or whenever I did a personality psychometric assessment, especially when I worked at Coca-Cola, my output was always extremely on the analytic side rather than on the people side. So I was kind of told, I won't make a good psychologist because of this. And it was very off-putting. In fact, I very nearly didn't pursue the path because I was being told that this didn't suit, my gender. Now I see that all as a strength because I'm able to tap in more to the people side of my own approach, aware that maybe I might focus a little bit too heavily on the program, driving the program forward and driving the project management forward. I actually learned from this and am able to bring in those other areas, not as a preference, but then I consciously bring that into the work that I do, especially when I'm coaching. So for me, it's about trust yourself, seek support from others, integrate the two and make a balanced, informed decision that has to include facts, and that's where I find it really important that there is this balance. You have to include a rational, fact-finding exercise with any intuitive, creative side of things that you have. And I find that if you can balance those two, then you will be making informed decisions. And I think that is really, for me, a lifelong learning that starts with trusting myself. And I think from that learning, this is what I now instill in others in my coaching, because this is what we do. So thank you, Ed, because from reading Ed's quote at the end of your video or during your video, it made me realize that building trust, especially in a work setting with management leaders that are trying to lead a team and build trust, it starts with yourself, and then you have authenticity, and then you have credibility, because you really are modeling what you are asking others to do. If you trust yourself, others would also trust in you. I hope that answers your question.
Very deep. And you know what I love is that you're referring to another Red Couch talk.
Yes.
I love it when my guests do that. That is,
yes,
you're extremely well prepared, Heather. I love that. And I just had another guest before, and you know, he's a Scrum Master and
yeah,
interculturalist. So
I love this.
I like
project management.
yeah,
love it.
When people bring, you know, so many different talents to the table, I really think, you know, we can make a difference in the world.
Yeah.
Starting from I would say, like a set of values that is a humanistic sort of approach.
Yeah.
And then, but also being very data driven and structured. I think that's so important in today's world, because, you know, otherwise we all will fall prey to fake news and stories. And I'm not saying good stories, not always good stories. So for example, you know, I always talk to my clients about how it is important to look at data and to set goals for themselves that are based on data, not just not just wobbly goals. But if they want to set goals, I feel like it's good to have some like numbers.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you can also start to trust yourself more with experience.
Yes.
Because sometimes, you know, younger people might not have the experience yet that would help them with their intuition. I think there's sometimes a bit confusion about, you know, the difference between having an emotion and intuition.
Yeah.
And maybe, you know, people don't feel like doing something. And that could be procrastination, but it could also be fear.
Exactly.
It could be, you know, that you're just afraid of that step.
Yes.
And that's why you're procrastinating. And then, you know, you can overcome it with coaching.
Yes.
So, you know, perfect example in this intercultural context that you mentioned. In Switzerland, it's really hard to find a job for expat spouses. And they need to get over themselves.
Yeah.
And they need to be out there and meet people in person. And for many, this is horrific. Many people don't like to do that. But I think it's just fear talking. You know, it's fear of being, maybe not being valued, or, you know, not being appreciated, or annoying somebody. And I'm sure you've been through some of those things as well when you went to Japan.
Yeah. And also with my clients that I've helped. And for me, it's always about that first step. If you can get the first step. I remember, so when I was in Japan, I don't even know if I've shared this story before. When I was in Japan, I experienced an earthquake for the first time. And I'd had no orientation. I didn't even know that Japan was a country where there were fault lines and they suffered with terrible earthquakes. And I was at home alone, and my husband was at work, and the whole building was shaking. It was a massive, on the Richter scale, it was a massive earthquake. And the apartment building I was in was structured and built so that it would shake. And that's how they're built nowadays. And I had no idea what to do. I didn't know that you were supposed to get under something hard, and that you were supposed to have liters of water nearby in case you got the building collapse. And I remember shortly after it finished, I was in such a state, I called a helpline, like the equivalent of the Samaritans or the Red Cross. And I never told my husband that I'd done that, because I didn't want to worry him, because he was starting a new job. He was having his own culture shock experiences in the office where he was. The last thing he needed was to have even more pressure. And I remember I called a helpline a couple of hours later, and I was in tears saying, I don't know what to do. And it was called the Tokyo English Lifeline. And a calendar had been left in the apartment by the agent that had helped us find the flat. And I remember just calling it and speaking to someone. Now, I'd never asked for help before or spoken to anyone before. And this was my journey into becoming a coach, because I then joined the Tokyo English Lifeline as a volunteer. I underwent 3 months of client-centered coaching, and then became a Lifeline volunteer myself.
That's so beautiful.
So, and then I realized that this is what I wanted to do. As a psychologist, I wanted to actually help people that would be in a similar position. Now, I consider myself very practical, very pragmatic. I'm really good generally in a crisis, but I had absolutely no idea that anything like this could happen to me. So I was pushed completely out of my comfort zone, but in a physical sense, which then had an emotional toll. But it took a while, but that's how I coped with the very difficult situation that I was in. And it turned into something really positive, because I've ended up now in a community where I'm helping others in a similar situation so that they get all the information they need before they move on assignment in order to make these decisions and to be safe, you know, not just physically, but emotionally as well. So it's a little bit like psychological safeguarding in a way for expats. So, you know, I find that this is really important part of the process. It's not just about the supply chain of we need schools for the children, we need curtains for the apartment, we need gym memberships. These are all things that are really important. But in order to be able to adjust successfully and happily, it's really important that any of these information gaps are smoothed in a way that means that you are able to adjust successfully and happily and be there for your family. And also this has, and it's been proven through research since the 70s, in fact, that the adjustment of the spouse has a positive or negative impact on the employee. And as you know, an early repatriation or a failed assignment, as we know from KPMG last year, can cost a company anywhere from 800,000 US dollars to 1.2 million US dollars. And coaching, in fact, costs, from the information I have about the coaching programs that I've been running, costs 0.3% of the average cost of a failed assignment. So when you look at it in those terms, you realize that it's actually a no-brainer. And what I found, Angie, I don't know if you found the same, but once you have those talks with the decision makers or the global talent mobility managers in HR, and they hear it and they see it and they see the data supporting it, and they read the comments from people who have been through these supportive programs, they then become champions of the work that we do. So that's why it's so important. It really is.
And it also helps if they've been through the experience themselves, either as
It
an
does.
expat spouse or an expat,
Yes. Yes.
because then they can relate to this personally a bit more.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, amazing. Do you like to be out on social media? How do you promote your work? On how do you how do you do networking? Do you have a professional like a preferred way for professional networking?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I almost felt a duty of care that I have to share the outcomes for policy and implications for practice of my research, and that I would be doing myself and the community a disservice if I don't. But I'm not very comfortable, if I'm being really honest with you. At the same time, I do believe it's a skill that can be developed and learned. And so it's on my hit list of my improvement developments, because I believe that, it's a really important aspect of the world we live in today, as I'm sure you know that as well. But I'm a big believer in personal networking. So I try to follow up. If people like my posts, I do try to actively follow up or engage in a way to learn about them, and make the time. So you have to make the time. I find that very important. And having conversations like this. So I find these interviews are really quite exciting, and I'm quite extroverted. So for me, I really like it. But when I'm working with my clients who are introverted, I do find that it's a little bit more difficult or challenging for someone with an introverted personality. But for me, for instance, I don't know how you feel about it, Angie, and the work that I do is multi-generational. And this is the first time we're all living in a world universe where we've got 4 generations in the workforce, and it's really exciting. And at the same time, having respect for how perhaps the zillennials and the millennials are communicating might be a little bit different to how we're communicating. So it's about, okay, well, how can I access this demographic and what tools can I use? So putting yourself in other people's shoes and perspective taking. And I'm a big believer. So I'm really interested in the context of where we've all come from and how we're growing as a workforce. So, for instance, I've studied, or I'm really interested in the industrial revolutions.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think that the first industrial, revolution over 100 years ago and 200 years ago, where we were, where we are today, and, we're in IR5 in America, or in Europe, we call it Industry 5.0. It's really being driven by Europe, and it really puts health and well-being at the center of any policy or operations or work that we're doing. The European Union is really driving this with the onset of AI and man-machine learning. And so I really believe that it's important that, yes, we engage with all of these new technologies, but we balance that with the sense of human connection. And what my research showed was that it validated the big data trends from McKinsey, from Deloitte, from PwC, and even the big RMCs like Cartus and BGRS at the time, Server, Vicart. What it did was it validated a lot of the findings that they had discovered, the big data findings about the family experience, health and well-being, resilience. But what it really didn't tap into was this sense of human connection. And that came from doing a qualitative study, which went deeper than being at scale. And so for me, it's about AI, embracing new technologies, embracing generations, and working and learning within those new frameworks, and always finding time for human connection, because we are humans. And no matter how much we do in terms of remote work, which I love, by the way, and for instance, John Lee, the great work that he's doing with Mercer for, work from anywhere, which is, great. And I know that he embraces the qualitative approach as well. We need to have drivers that are constantly using big and thick data so that we have a balance in what it is that we're learning and what we're measuring. Because if we're only measuring what variables allow themselves to be measured, I don't think we're really hearing and listening to the full spectrum of voices that are in the workforce. So that's why, for me, it's very important that networking, embracing the multi-dimensional approach with generations, is balanced against where we are historically, where we're going, where we're headed, and being in the present and remembering that we are humans, and that we're living in turbulent times that we've never experienced before. This volatility and unpredictability. I think last year we had the most amount of political elections that we've ever had, all happening around the world at the same time. This brought a lot of uncertainty as well. We have geopolitical uncertainty with the different wars that are taking place, and we have turbulence in the economic markets, and this is disconnecting us socially. And so people engage at work and look for things at work that maybe find balance and stability, and health and well-being could be one of those dimensions that brings that. So yeah, so I feel quite passionately about those things.
I totally agree with you. And I coach people across different industries, across different professions. And I feel like, I've recently heard the term loneliness epidemic for the first time. And I also think, we I mean, we've been talking about well-being at work also for the last 20 years, but I feel a lot of people, they want to, they also want to go to work because of the human connection
Yeah,
that they are getting from work and the stability. And, also it's a part of our social life. Work is
yeah,
only transactional. It's not only sitting on your computer
yeah,
and getting things done.
yeah.
That is not the only part of work, but
No,
also the structure, the conflict,
yeah,
the chat that you have on the water cooler.
yeah,
It's all part of being at work.
yeah,
That's also why, the loss of work creates so much stress for people,
yeah,
because they're not
yeah.
only losing an income, they're also losing a social system that
They are.
they
Yeah,
used, that was really useful for them and helpful for them.
yeah.
So yeah, I completely agree with you, Heather, and I'm so glad that you also have the data and the research and the energy behind that, and that yeah, I wish that you become even more known in the world. And tell me what you have coming up. Do you do any like events in the next few weeks or anything that you can talk to us about?
Yeah, so I've just presented. I was a speaker at an industry conference last week called the Association for Business Psychology. And so I was a speaker and I talked about a new ROI, which is return on inclusion.
Uh-huh.
And really, it was about inclusion of big data and thick data. That's where it starts. Inclusion of business psychology in any global mobility equation, along with the inclusion of underrepresented groups. So it wasn't just about, as we know, inclusion in terms of DE and I or EDI. So that was really a wonderful experience to meet wonderful business psychologists in the field and to learn about the work that they're doing, because the world of work is big and our lived experiences in the world of work are also differentiated and very individual. So it was wonderful to get some different perspectives. Um, and um, and I've got next coming up, I do have some magazine articles and actually, coaching articles where my research continues to generate interest. And so, yeah, so I think it's a very exciting time to be looking at the practitioner community of where these insights can be shared. And so, yeah, so that's all very exciting as well. Um, yeah, and I did want to share something with you before we close the interview, because last week, so do you wear different hats, Angie? I'm sure you do, right?
All the time.
Yeah, okay. So I've got a hat here that I'm going
Huh?
to put on. Let's see if you can guess what it is.
Looks a bit Bavarian.
Yeah,
My
okay.
teddy bear has one of those.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
cute, isn't it?
Yeah. What is it?
Yeah, it is. It is a Bavarian hat. But so you may not know this about me. This is really something that no one knows. So this is a huge reveal here. I am a yodeling enthusiast.
Oh my goodness. So
And
are you going to
last
give us
week,
a sample?
no, last week at the conference, I led a session on yodeling and taught a group how to use yodeling. The underpinning mechanics of yodeling is a technique called a vocal flip, where you
Yeah.
break the voice
Yeah.
from chest voice to head voice. So I did a session with psychologists in the room for 30 minutes, and I taught them how to yodel. And it was fantastic. It was wonderful. It's something that I've just discovered myself. And I guess what I wanted to share with you is that from something that people believe, so alpine yodeling in Switzerland and Austria and Germany, um, is a very special form of yodeling. I would call it a communication tool,
Mhm.
because I'm a psychologist and that's what we do. But it may very well have originated in Africa, and many tribes use a form of yodeling to communicate with each other. But what really amazed me was that the mechanics that are really wonderful underpinning yodeling are found all over pop music today. And so when you listened to pop music, you recognize, or I recognize, vocal flipping, which is what is used in order to be able to yodel. And yodeling can be quite addictive. And so I wanted to share my enthusiasm, and I did. And now there's another new generation of psychologists that have also become quite intrigued by these techniques of yodeling. So I wanted to share that with you today. I think this is something that not many people know in my personal life or even in my professional life, that sometimes we can put different hats on and challenge ourselves, but learn through it. And I have learned so much from just being curious about yodeling and where it comes from.
I love that. But I would really also love to hear you yodel. Can you not give us a small sample?
I can give you, okay, I can give you a small sample.
Yeah.
Yole, yole, yolo, yole, yolo, yole, yolo, yole, yolo.
Wow. Thank you, Heather. That's amazing. Oh God, that's so cute. I'm almost crying. You know why I'm wearing this top? This is from Kashmir. This is my India outfit because I am a Bollywood dancer.
Wow.
Yeah, but I'm
Okay.
not gonna sample this now. And sometimes in seminars, when we have like a dead moment, then I
Yeah.
teach people a few steps,
Okay.
few dance steps. It was great talking to you today. I wish you a
Great
wonderful
talking to you.
weekend,
Have a
and I
lovely
hope we see each
weekend.
other.
Yeah,
Hope we
see you
see each
soon.
other at a conference in the near future. Then we
Bye.
will yodel and Bollywood at the same time.
Oh, that would be amazing. Why not? Why
Yeah, I
not?
think it sounds like a great fusion. We should do that. We should try that.
Bye. Bye,
Have a
Angie.
great day. Bye, Heather.
Bye.